Okay, let's make it this way then. I'll ask you to present your team and then to say your names. Okay? Then I will read the motion you are discussing. Please, the pro team, you are?
So I will be the first speaker, Kevin Servale, of the proposition team. This is my teammate Sara Cautela, who will be the second speaker. And in conclusion, you have Francesca Di Rocco, who will be the third speaker. Reply? For the reply, it will be me.
You know what? I'm asking you also to, I do that, then, because I wrote this. So, today the teams are Ovidio Sulmona, that will support the motion in the pro side, and Fermi Cecina, who will be the opposition team. Okay, so your name is Kevin. Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, it's Kevin Servale.
Serravalle. Because I couldn't follow. And your second speaker?
Sara Cautela.
Hola. So, the opposition team, please. Oh, sorry.
I'm the first speaker of the opposition team. My name is Arba, A-R-B-A,
Arba.
Mercoci, M-E-R-K-O-C-I.
You go. The second.
I'm the second speaker. My name is Arianna Bucci. And I will do the reply.
Okay, I'll ask you for the present. The opposition third speaker.
I'm the third speaker and I'm Chiara Mariani Heinz.
Mariani.
No, Marie Annie Heinz. H-E-I-N-Z.
Thank you. Okay, so the opposition of the reply.
Arianna Bucci.
Arianna Bucci. The proposition of the reply. Kevin. Okay, so today you will debate the motion, which is this house would ban the consumption of animal meat. Okay. The time, paper. That's it. High school. Okay. So, please. Your first speaker, Kevin, please tell me when to start.
Yes, of course. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1.
Okay,
A man can live and be healthy without killing animals for food. Therefore, if he eats meat, he participates in taking animal life merely for the sake of his selfish nature and appetite, and to act so is immoral. Lev Tolstoy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Servale, and today I will be speaking as the first speaker of the proposition team who is in favor of banning animal meat. Now, our House's case line is going to be composed of 3 main key points. The first one being humans and animals are not that different, in which I myself will take the burden to explain with simple logical thinking how it is easy for our subconscious to avoid doing something that, as I've said in the quote, is quite immoral. Following up with the second point being entitled The Danger of Meat Consumption, which will be explained further down the road by our house, where the part of the human being's healthy lifestyle being put at risk by this very consumption will be dove down more into heavy detail on how and why. And with the last point, but not the least, is called eating meat damages the environment as much as it damages us. And while it's quite self-explanatory, that is to say that, of course, we are not the only living species on this planet. So for the third point, we will also be considering other forms that are alive on planet Earth. Now, before I go on explaining the first point of our argumentative case line, I'd like to give the audience some definitions that we have found. The first one being the definition of animal meat, which comes from Wikipedia. Meat is animal flesh that is eaten as food produced from slaughterhouses. Now, this word, slaughterhouses, will be a key word more down the road, so I advise that this word is kept into account. Further down the road, we will need the definition of sentient, which comes from the Oxford Dictionary, and where we have found that it means to be able to feel or perceive things such as emotions and sensations. Now, with that, allow me to dive into further detail about the first point. Now, what we need to know is a study that has been done by an American scientist. His name is Gregory Burns. Now, he, after a 2-year-long study, has found out with due experiments, of course humane and within the law, that humans and animals have the same neural capacities, which again ties back to the word sentient, because while animals are not aware, like us, of critical thinking, they still feel, even though they do not think like us. So the first point is all about, if you feel the pain that we are causing to a living being that can feel the pain of us just giving into our craving for meat, is it not a violation of their right to live just because they're not part of our society? The point,
Yeah.
please.
Is this a moral argument that you are bringing forward or not?
Exactly so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Having answered this little misunderstanding, let us move on. As I was saying, yes, this is a moral point of view, and it's because, as I've said and stated once more, the fact that if they can't feel just like us, I'd like us to put ourselves in their shoes. Would we like to be able to feel said pain that they go through each time they are trained and harvested, and more details that are quite gruesome to nominate, so I will resent from doing so. For that, I'd like to add the fact that, excuse me, I'd like to add the fact that the problem is that if animals meat is something that is such a keystone for our well-being and survival, then why can't we just find other means, such as substitute foods or something else that can replenish said hole that can be left by not consuming meat? Because in the end, we know that our system is, our bodily system, the one of humans talking about, is made up of mostly water, which, yes, is the key point of our survival. But meat, or at least the proteins that come from meat, are not keystone. So I ask, why don't we just use something else that doesn't involve animals? Because at this point, it seems to us, to our house, that humans just eat meat because of a natural instinct, if not for a selfish desire. Because, as I've stated, If they live and breathe, we are just taking away the right to live. And to do so is moral. So for that, again, I ask, why don't we just not do it if it is yet so simple, if it's all about willpower, to just say, let's not do that, since we know we don't need animal meat to survive, because the nutrients that are in meat, we are all fully aware that can be found in other different ailments, which will be explained further down the road by my houses and following statements and argumentative lines. With that, excuse me, with that, I'd just like to remind it once more that given that they're sentient, given that we can avoid doing so, our house strongly believes that eating meat is easily avoidable. And if I'd like to state, I'd like to quote Mr. Bryan, which is a philosopher, pardon me if I do not remember his surname. He states that if it is important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. So I ask, what is our excuse for just eating animal meat if we can and could avoid it? With that, I thank the audience for having listened to me, and I give the floor to the next speaker.
7 minutes 57.
I will now start my speech.
Just an hour, please.
Kidding.
Give us time, please. We have to decide. That's okay. Yednaya, can we go on?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I will now
Please.
start my speech.
Please let me.
I value liberty above all else. Without liberty, no other value can be realized. Green Rod again. Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Arba Mirkashi, I'm the first speaker of the opposition team. First of all, I'd like to confute some of the things, the points that the first speaker of the proposition team brought up. First of all, he talked merely about moral things. I've heard that adjective a lot of times, but can we define moral? What's ethic for me could be unethic for you. It's a really subjective thing, and we shouldn't base a law or a law that more specifically prohibits and bans something on an ethical thing, because it's different from a lot of point of views. So yeah, ethic is subjective, and we shouldn't base a law on something that's immoral, because everyone has a freedom of expression, of will and action, and we should base our laws on that, and not on whether something is ethical or unethical. I didn't really understand if the proposition team brought up a model. They talked about whether they should substitute foods, but they didn't really say how. How we're gonna, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. So, since you stated that ethic is subjective, does your house think that it is right to kill animals just to eat them?
Yes, I was going to say that. Our team is really aware of the issues that are connected to the slaughter and the consumption of animal meat. But we do not want to ban drastically the consumption and production of animal meat. We would like to reduce and limitate through norms and normatives the production of animal meat. Thank you for your question. As I was saying, the proposition team didn't really introduce to us a model, a concrete, and a model that we can actuate on our society. How we're gonna reinvent the industries of meat. Where are we gonna put the workers? How we are gonna reinvent and rethink the industries. The proposition team didn't really brought that up, and I think that it's important. If we want to ban drastically an industry that's so giant and big like the meat industry, we should also think about how we're going to reinvent it and how we're going to give work to all the workers. Now I will talk about the team line of my team, the opposition team. As I said, it's really important that we are really aware of the danger and the issue concerning the production of animal meat. But we do not want to ban. We think that banning is really strong verb, and banning something, especially a product that we consume on a daily basis, I think not every one of us, but we quite consume. It's really drastical and radical, and is really difficult to actuate. So yeah, banning, I think that banning is not the answer. Also, the team line will go around on the freedom of expression and the freedom of the individuals to decide whether to do something or not. In fact, the team line will start with my intervention that would talk, my argumentation that would talk about how freedom of expression is really important and everyone should do what's best for themselves. Then the second speaker, Arianna Bucci, will talk about the prohibism and how banning something did not really lead us to a positive impact, but it brought people to want that thing more and also develop black market and criminalized stuff. And then still my Arianna Bucci, the second speaker of the opposition team, will talk about the social gap and the food awareness that would be actuated if we really did reinvent the society. And then the third speaker will computate and talk about the points that the proposition team will brought up. As I was saying, my point really stands on the freedom of expression and how it's important to make our will and our freedom of action and will at the priority. As I was saying, when I computed the proposition team, we should not base these laws on moral thing or ethical thing, but we should put our will and our will on in the first place. I think that everyone should be able to and free to do what they find best for themselves, and not create laws that depend on merely subjective things. That is my speech. Thank you for the attention.
This was 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Ready? Demir?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so please. Thank you, and then Paola. Paola, you.
Sarah.
Sara. Sorry.
Oh. Second row, Sarah.
Sara.
Can you?
Cautela.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's easy to confuse, you
Yes.
know. That's it. Tell me when
Yes.
you're going to start.
So I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sara Cautela, and today I'll be speaking as the second speaker of the team in favor of the given motion, which I believe has already been explained well enough, so I won't have to explain it furthermore, and I'll just go on with my speech. I'm here today to expose you the second and third points of our argumentative line, given that the first point, which was humans and animals are not that different, has already been explained. So before, however, I can actually go on with my speech, I shall expose our team's disagreement with what has been just stated by the opposition team, as it has been said that since ethic is subjective, we shouldn't base a law on a pure ethical thought. But we have to say that it is also unethical, for example, just to kill human beings as much as it is to kill animals, and that is exactly why it has, of course, been made illegal to kill other people. So why shouldn't we do the same thing with animals? Another thing I would like to express our disagreement on with what has been said is the fact that everyone should do what is best. It has been stated that everyone should do what is best for them. But if people actually started doing whatever they preferred and whatever was best for them, wouldn't that be a complete disaster for our society? We do believe that it will cause so much trouble and it will get out of our hands to control. Having clarified this, I can now actually go on with my speech, so I'll expose and explain the second and third point of our argumentative line, which are the danger of meat consumption and eating meat damages the environment as much as it damages us. Eating meat, as I've said, doesn't just harm innocent animals. It also harms those who actually eat meat daily, as it increases the risk of suffering from several life-threatening diseases. Many authorities, including, yes?
Yeah, sorry. Could you define consumption, because you did not define it at the start of the debate?
Okay, thank you for that. Consumption is the act of eating something, whichever type of food you prefer to think of. I hope I made that clear, if it wasn't before.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. As I was saying, many authorities, including the British Medical Association, have confirmed that people who consume meat on a regular basis have a greater likelihood of suffering from obesity, coronary heart diseases, and high blood pressure than people who actually do not eat meat. This has been also proved by a study carried out by Oxford University, which confirmed that the consumption of processed meat, unprocessed meat, and poultry meat, such as chicken or turkey, is linked to, either alone or together, is linked to a much higher risk of suffering from 9 different illnesses. In order to analyze meat consumption and its association with common conditions, I'd also like to talk to you about the study that the UK Biobank has carried out between 2006 and 2010. They recruited around 500,000 middle-aged adults to see how the consumption of meat actually damages our health. And at the end of the study, they found that on average, participants reporting daily consumption of meat experience more adverse health consequences compared to those who do not consume meat.
Pilar,
Yes.
so do you propose a vegan or vegetarian diet?
Yes, I was just about to get there.
Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I was going to explain it later, but I'll answer your question right now. We do understand that meat has many proteins which are fundamental for our health, for example, for muscle growth. However, there are many other foods that can substitute these fundamental needs for our body, for example, legumes, such as chickpeas, lentils, beans, and peas. But as I said before, I'll explain that further on. At the end of the, in quantity terms, still connecting to the study carried out by the UK Biobank, in quantity terms, the study showed that every 70 grams of both unprocessed and processed red meat consumed daily increased the risk of heart diseases by 15% and the risk of diabetes of 30%. Now, as I've said before, we all know that proteins contained in meat are important, but there are many alternatives that can provide equal health benefits. As I was saying, legumes, for example, are excellent meat substitutes, and even though their vegetable proteins do not contain all the essential amino acids that meat proteins do, the solution to this simple problem is to combine actually legumes and cereal in the same meat, and the problem would be simply solved. Another reason why we believe that eating meat is dangerous for everyone and should be thus banned is that a huge amount of the infective illnesses that afflict mankind, among which, for example, the pandemic that spread in 2002, are transmitted by animals. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has in fact shown how epidemics and pandemics are just the result of how we produce, procure, and transport meat. According to the NIH, so the National Institute of Health, approximately 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, which means that they are caused by harmful germs all carried by animals, such as viruses, bacteria, and parasites, for example. Scientists, in fact, estimate that more than 6 out of every known infectious disease in people can be spread from animals. And moreover, 3 out of every 4 new emerging infectious diseases in people come actually from animals. All these results just add to the already existing evidence that eating meat, especially processed meat, has a negative impact on our health. And this is why we strongly claim that it should be banned. Moving on to the third and final point of our case line, the first thing I would like to underline is the fact that out of every human system that wastes natural resources, the food chain is the one that is most responsible for the ecological crisis that we are now having to face at this time in history. As a matter of fact, modern agriculture is the #1 contributor to a variety of factors that impose hazards on the environment. And the production also, in addition, the difference between the emissions between meat and plant production is stark. As a matter of fact, production of meat worldwide causes twice the pollution of production of plant-based foods. The impact of livestock on emissions, according to the United Nations, is more than 14% of all more than 13% of all man-made greenhouse gases. All these things bring us back to one of our duties. We have to change the way we procure and consume food and meat, especially meat, because sustaining the life of 8 billion of people by destroying our nature is one, if not actually the biggest atrocities we could ever make. Having said that, I have now reached the end of my speech. I hope I've made myself as clear as possible, and thank you all.
8 minutes, 02. one or this? The lake.
This one.
Okay, so the last one is 8 minute 02.
Okay, thank you. And I'm ready to go on whenever you want.
Okay, thank you. Well, allora Arianna, please, your turn. Oh, sorry, upgrading here.
I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna, which I'm the second speaker of the opposition team. First of all, I'd like to start my intervention by confirming what our mate has just said. First of all, I'd like to start retaking the previous documentation presented by my mate. We said about the fact that everyone still rated with morality. Everyone does whatever is best for himself. So actually, it's true. You say that if everyone should do whatever he wanted, just following his behavior, it will be dangerous probably. But we're saying something obviously concerning by the law. And then I would like to talk about the dangers of meat consumption. You've been talking about obesity and hyperpression in individuals that consume meat daily. But I'd like to take the model promoted by our team that still want to limit the production of animal products. That's why we do understand all the illness related with this topic, but we still think that ban is not actually necessary because probably it's too extreme measure in order to try to resolve this problem. You also have talked about substitutes and vegan diet, and thank you to have bring up this point because I wanted to talk to you about how this kind of diets can be such expensive and so bring you on and it could increase the social gap that is already an important and effective illness of today. So actually the only nutrient that is missing in a vegan diet is the B12 vitamin, and it needs to be absorbed with supplements. Deficit of B12 vitamin could lead to megaloblastic anemia, white matter of the spinal cord and brain, and peripheral neuropathy. So we were talking about serious problem. Yeah?
Yes, thank you. Are you aware of the fact that legumes, as I've said before, are actually rich in fiber, carbohydrate, and also B vitamins?
Yeah, but they are not enough to satisfy this kind of necessity, and that's why you need to introduce other kinds of supplements. Also talking about amino acid, as you said, or just talking about beans. They are not absolutely enough to fill these lacks. So, as I was saying, the lack of B12 can be very harmful for our health, and it can be. There are some treatments to try to improve this problem, but the treatment can alleviate the anemia, but all the neurologic effects to the progress still goes on. So I also would like to talk about our second documentation, which is related to prohibitionism. I'd like to give to you our definition of the word prohibitionism, which we concern legal philosophy and political theory often used in lobbying, which holds that citizens will abstain from action if the action are typed as unlawful and the prohibition are enforced by law enforcement. We have seen many cases of how prohibitionism actually doesn't work. I'd like to bring to you the example of a model promoted by the Single Convention of Narcotic Drugs that with the treatment of drugs in Switzerland. This is a treaty aimed at combating drug abuse through coordinated international actions. And we've seen how the prohibitionist approach has not worked in this situation. Just let the problem growing up. So in the first moment, the policy was treated with this prohibitionist view. So it was banned the production, treatment, and consumption, of course, of drugs, and in order to reduce the addiction and the trafficking of these elements. But this model absolutely failed. So in the early 90s, it was promoted another model that is called the full pilot model, which actually tries to approach in another way to this kind of problem, with a program of re-education, with some prevention treatment that want to reduce the impact of these elements. And today, as one of the major example of how prohibitionism actually does not work, because it could lead to problems linked to, as my first speaker has already said, black market, for example. So I'd like to retrace the main points of my argumentation, underlining how vegan or vegetarian diet is not absolutely accessible to everyone, and it would just increase the social gap, which is a problem that is already present and growing in our society. And I also would like to underline another time how the prohibitionism isn't the best way to fight this kind of illness. Probably education project would be better to resolve this problem by every point of view. Thank you for your attention. I'm done.
The time elapsed is 7 minutes 57.
I'm ready to go on whenever you are. Thank you.
Me too. It's okay. Francesca, then, your turn.
I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Francesca Di Rocco, and today I'm here as the third speaker of the proposition team. As a matter of fact, this team is in favor of the topic discussed from the beginning until now. So this house would ban the consumption of animal meat. As it has already been elucidated by this house, our case line was composed of 3 main points that I will remind the audience later, summarizing our argumentative line. But first, I would like to highlight some of the points of clash of this debate, also confuting what has just been said by the opposition team. First of all, it has been said that ethic is subjective. So if we want to do something, we can do that even just because we think that is correct. It has been specified that this opinion also only concerns. Yes.
I'm sorry, I was just wondering before you didn't give a definition of banning and who it concerns, if it concerns a human in general, I mean ages or things like this.
Okay. So to ban is to decide or say officially that something is not allowed. Thank you for your question. I will now go on with what I was talking about. So, as a matter of fact, ethic is not a subjective thing, because you cannot decide to mistreat or kill animals just because you're selfish and you want to eat animal meat. Just because we gave an actual solution, a working solution, that is a very important and innovative alternative that are legumes and cereals that are already eaten right now, but they can totally substitute meat when they are eaten together, because they contain a lot of positive elements, just like carbohydrate, fiber, B vitamin, etc. And that was a point already discussed by my house. These, in our opinion, are just positive things that we can find in legumes and cereals. What it is negative for us are cancer, hypertension, diabetes, or also obesity, coronary heart diseases, or high blood pressure. That are all illnesses that come from eating meat, especially red meat, but also from white meat. That is why we are actually against the consumption of animal meat, and we would like to ban it because it is dangerous to eat meat, because we have a lot of negative points behind this situation and this market. Another important thing to be underlined is that the opposition, the House of Opposition, said that in their model the ban is not necessary, because we could just limit the animal products. But this way, this will not be a win-win, and this will not be a positive thing for both the parts, because it will be a negative thing for everybody. So for us that sustain the ban of this product, and also for them that sustain the fact that animal meat should be eaten, because with the use of some limits, we wouldn't eliminate the consumption of animal meat, but also we would go on eating meat, but in a small quantity. That is not a point for us. But also, it has been said that the diets we proposed, so the diets composed of legumes, cereals, and natural elements, cannot satisfy the human population, but also that these diets will be very expensive. So we do not agree with that statement, just because we all know that meat is a lot more expensive when compared to legumes and cereals, but also fruit and vegetables in general. And we all know that these elements are a lot cheaper in comparison to meat. I would also like to, yes.
Do you have a model you can propose on a economic point of view, industrial point of view, transitional point of view?
Of course, we have a solution. When we decided to sustain this motion, we thought about a lot of solutions, innovative solutions we could have under every field, concerning every field. So we thought about the solution in the food sector, so we could eat legumes and cereals instead of meat, but also the industries that could simply change their role from a meat sector into a legume one, because we all know, we can all understand that if we started to eat more legumes, more cereals, more fruit, there will be many more industries that produce those kind of elements instead of meat. I will now go on with my speech. Thank you for your second question. I would like to remind the audience the three main points of our argumentative line when summarizing it. So our first point was about the fact that humans and animals are not that different. It has been already elucidated by my mates that the psychological point of view of violence is very important, and it does not have to be underestimated, because animals, just like humans, have a neural capacity that is the same that we have. So they can perfectly understand what is going on around them. So when we mistreat them, when we kill them in order to eat their meat, they can perfectly understand the tortures that are happening to their body, and they suffer from a physical point of view, but from both point of view, physical one and a psychological one, because they can perfectly understand what is happening around them, and it has been proved by many scientists, as my mate explained before. Our second point was about the danger of meat consumption, when my mate mentioned a lot of illnesses and problems that can come up from the consumption of animal meat. So this kind of illnesses that are cancer, hypertension, diabetes. But let's go on in conclusion with our third point of our argumentative line. So eating meat damages the environment as much as it damages us. We have to protect our biodiversity, and we do not have to make animals suffer, but also because they can perfectly understand that. So I would like to conclude my speech with a very important sentence that has already been said. If it is important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you will find an excuse. Thank you for listening to me. I will give the floor to the next speaker.
The elapsed time is 8 minutes 16.
I'm ready to go on whenever you are. Thank you.
Okay? Then, so, your turn. Please give us your speech.
Yes, I will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, my name is Kayla Heinz and I'm the third speaker of the opposition team, and today I'm going to firstly confute what the proposition team has just talked about relating to this topic, and then I will continue to confute their whole debate line and team line. So to start, I'm going to start with the third speaker. Again, we find as the opposition that the model that was proposed wasn't sufficient, again, we didn't know who it would be financed by, really how the model would work, how agriculture, how water footprint by agriculture would be better than the water footprint used by consumption of animal meat, how the jobs would be transitioned from one sector to another. This has also not been explained, how it would be financed, and more importantly, where all those animals would go. Again, we made a POI about banning and whether it would be only about humans who it would concern. The proposition team did not really answer my question, because we know that if it only concerns humans, of course, it does make sense. But if we think about other living species that the proposition team says they care about so much, there are animals that cannot live without animal meat. For instance, cats. How would they eat and how would... Yes?
Yes, I'm sorry, but contrary to those animals who do not have another choice and have to eat other animals, we do have a choice. So don't you think that we make the wrong one if we eat animals?
Yes, absolutely, but how do you produce food for them? This does not answer my question. How, if you cannot produce and consume, if you do not consume, you do not produce animal meat, since you have said it is cruel to eat them, how do you produce food for your cat? How do you do that?
Sorry.
Yes?
Cats do not eat other cats. They
Cats eat meat. They can only eat meat. If they do not have meat in their diet, they will die. And if... Okay, so sorry. I hope that this answers your question. Going back to the start of this debate, I think one of the main points, again, as the other team has stated, was moral subjectivism. And so, moral subjectivism for us means that if there isn't an universal moral truth, then morality just falls apart. Our first speaker has said this also. If I believe something is moral but she doesn't, what is moral at this point? And I think that we can use this argument again with confuting their first argument about humans and animals not being that different. If humans and animals are not that different, also in their moral compass, as you have said, because I made a POI asking you if this was a moral statement, if you thought that both of them answer morally, do we also condone rape? Do we condone cannibalism? Do we condone infanticide? Those are human and animal impulses. Do we also condone that? They also did not really define banning at first. They kind of did later. We do not know again who it is banned for. Is it banned for animals? Is it banned for humans? Is it banned for anyone? We do not know. Again, another POI about a definition about consumption. They did answer me and said that consumption for them was only food. So what do we do about milk production? This is also not ethical. What do we do about animal cruelty? Animal cruelty is so prominent in our society right now, in shampoos, in any cosmetic thing. Yes?
I'm sorry, but don't you think that now in this debate we should focus our attention on the consumption of actual animal meat, as the motion states?
Yes, absolutely, but your whole first argumentation is about morality and how there is this whole big moral compass around animals and how they suffer. Do you not think they also suffer during animal cruelty? You could have extended it to also this, but you didn't. Again, another POI about vegetarianism and veganism. So you have said that this would be for you an alternative to an omnivorous diet. And you have also said that meat consumption can lead to different problems like diabetes, etc. So our team actually wanted to put an emphasis on education, as our second speaker, Ariana, said, mainly in her third intervention, how we need to be educated about our diet. So yes, an excessive meat consumption can lead to all these consequences, just like an excessive vegetable consumption can lead to other problems, other lacks. You did not provide us with a model that can educate our society on how to have all these nutrients in the right way, how to have vitamin B12, for instance, because you can't just go on and eat potatoes for the rest of your life without eating meat and think that magically now you're healthy and you do not lack any other substance. So we, again, do not think that this is sufficient. With our whole education, with this whole education argument, we feel like with our third argumentation brought by Ariana Bucci, we explained how this is so lacking, especially in poverty. Poverty is now such a main focus in big cities where they also do not have right access and direct access to fresh vegetables, fresh agriculture in general. So how do we solve this? How can we make it accessible to everyone, at the same time easy to understand? How we can have a balanced diet without using meat, knowing that most people already now with obesity do not have this. Then you brought up a very brilliant point about pandemics, saying that the contact between animals and humans do sometimes bring up pandemics. This is absolutely true. But again, with your model, you did not say where all these animals would go. We now know that the animals that we have on Earth are way more than what we need as humanity to consume. Where do we put all those animals? And if they just lie here, they have to be in contact with humans. So your pandemics argumentation just falls flat. This is how we think your model wasn't specific enough, didn't explain how it can be, why it would happen, how it would happen, how it would be financed, and how the education process behind it could work. Thank you very much for that.
7 minutes 50. So, we have finished with the constructive speeches. Please, now we're going to the replies. The first team to give us a reply will be the opposition team. Arianna,
Yeah.
it's your turn.
I
Please.
start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, in my last intervention, I'd like to retract the main point of clash of our debate, focusing on the main point. First of all, I'd like to say that during this debate, we've seen the confrontation between two different goals. By one side, we had an idea, but effectively unrealizable project proposed by the proposition team in order to see our cruelty-free world, but that probably promotes a model that's a bit too extreme to effectively apply. And in fact, it's really hard by some point of view of the legitimacy and the economical point of view, because the myth is effectively eradicated in our society. So probably banning it would be a bit too much. Probably the way of dealing with this problem promoted by the opposition team, which is to reduce it and to promote information and education program, would be better to try to ameliorate and improve this situation by every point of view, starting from the environmental problem, arriving to the ethical one with more ethical production in the entire supply chain. The argumentation proposed by the proposition team were based on a subjective and ethical point of view that cannot be the same for everyone, and we cannot impose a diet or an effectively lifestyle. Because talking about veganism, we're talking a concrete choice to see to have a different vision of the world, just basing on ethical reason. The main point of clash of this debate had been the freedom of expression of will that has been exposed by the first speaker of our team, underlining how this kind of choice cannot be just based on an ethical reason, an ethical thing, a subjective one. Then we also have to deal with the fact of prohibitionism and how it would be dangerous for our society, because probably we would have the opposite effect. So meat would become a product on the black market and would become more dangerous. Then we also talked about social gap and how a vegan diet cannot be accessible to everyone, because talking about banning, we absolutely eliminate the production of meat for everyone, and we've seen how it's not sustainable by no point of view. I'd like to remark how probably the reduction would be the best way to deal with this problem. And thank you. I'm just done.
So the speech lasted 3 minutes 52. Good. Kevin,
May I?
yes, that's your turn, please.
Very well. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Hello once again. I already introduced myself, so allow me to cut to the chase as the reply speaker this time around of the proposition team. This time around, the burden that I will be bearing is the one to highlight the issues and misunderstanding known as points of clash that I personally, and together with my house, have found out throughout this debate. Starting with the biggest issue of them all is the subject of this actual ban, and as we've seen was a big subject of discussion. As I've personally stated in my first speech when giving the definition of sentient, as I've said, sentient beings are the ones that are the subject of this ban, and not the ones able of critical thinking, which again is different. If you may remember my definition, sentient was one that feels, while the other is one that thinks and knows. And as we know, animals feel but don't know. Moving on, the second one was the problem with ethic, whether something is subjective or objective to do, and if ethic is subjective or objective itself. So we already established well enough that animals and humans' lives have quite the same value, so let's cut to the actual question. What is subjective about taking a life for one's personal desire? Our house strongly believes that it is not subjective and it is objectively a wrong thing to take a life, no matter which one it may be. Moving on, the solutions with different dangers that both the houses have proposed today, being one having the dangers of more meat consumption and one more dangers of our personal model, the one more based on plants, and actually more specifically legumes, is the one that actually has the solution, because in model that we have stated, and for that we apologize if it has not been made clear, we sustain legumes and not tubers such as potatoes, which have been an example made by the opposition team. Since, as it has been stated, both legumes and pasta, which can be arranged, as has been stated by my house, can simply make up for the B12 vitamin and amino acid lack that there is no such thing of. Furthermore, the moral compass once again has been an issue of this debate. given that they wanted to limitate the meat consumption, which still allows, even if to a smaller scale, merciless slaughter to keep taking place, while we would ban it and completely remove, while actually finding a substitute, once again, legumes and pasta, which can make up the space that meat can leave behind. With that, I'd like to quickly revise our team's argumentative line, which was composed of the moral compass. Yes, humans and animals are not that different, in which we thoroughly explain that the issue is about people and things that feel, not people and beings that think. The one later being the danger of meat consumption, where the problems are way more highlighted and the solution has been clearly stated, being legumes and pasta. Once again, I cannot stress enough. And last but not least, that eating meat damages the environment as much as it damages us, which, once again, is quite an issue that cannot be batted an eye at. With that, we just like to strongly state once more that meat consumption can be avoided and a solution is and has been presented. Thank you for listening.